Laura Bennett had always loved the stars. When she was a little girl growing up in Montana, she would lie on the grass behind her parents' farmhouse and watch the night sky for hours. She dreamed of traveling to those distant lights, of seeing what no human had ever seen before. Now, at 32 years old, she had made that dream come true. She was a lieutenant commander aboard the deep space reconnaissance vessel Horizon. It was not a glamorous job. Most days involved checking engine systems, running diagnostics, and making sure nothing exploded. But every morning when she woke up and looked through her small cabin window at the endless darkness filled with ancient stars, she felt like the luckiest person alive. The Horizon was a medium-sized ship with a crew of 47 people. Their mission was simple. They explored the edges of known space, mapped new systems, and searched for signs of intelligent life. Captain Daniel Harris ran a tight ship, but he was fair. Laura respected him. He had given her a chance when other captains had passed her over, and she worked hard to prove his faith in her was not misplaced. On the night everything changed, Laura was finishing her shift in the engineering bay. She was tired and looking forward to a hot meal and a few hours of sleep. The ship was quiet. Most of the crew were either resting or on light duty. There was nothing on the sensors, nothing unusual at all. Then the lights went out. It happened so fast that Laura did not even have time to be afraid. One moment she was walking down the corridor toward the mess hall, and the next moment she was standing in complete darkness. The emergency lights did not come on. The engines went silent. Even the soft hum of the life support systems disappeared. Laura reached for her communicator, but it was dead. She tried to feel her way along the wall, but her hands found nothing. It was as if the ship itself had vanished around her. Then she saw the light. It was blue and cold, coming from somewhere above her. Laura looked up and saw something that made her heart stop. A hole had opened in the ceiling of the corridor. No, not a hole, a doorway. And through that doorway, she could see shapes moving. Tall shapes, wrong shapes. They came down like spiders, their long limbs bending in ways that human limbs could not bend. They were covered in something that looked like black metal or maybe chitin, like the shell of an insect. Their heads were narrow, with large compound eyes that reflected the blue light in 1,000 tiny fragments. Laura tried to run, but she could not move. Her body was frozen in place by some invisible force. She could only watch as the creatures surrounded her. One of them reached out with a limb that ended in something like fingers, but with too many joints. It touched her forehead, and she felt a sharp pain behind her eyes. Then everything went dark again. When Laura woke up, she was lying on a cold metal table in a room she did not recognize. The walls were smooth and gray without any seams or corners. The light came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She tried to sit up, but straps held her down. They were made of something soft but impossibly strong. She was not alone. One of the creatures stood near the table, watching her with those terrible compound eyes. It was even more frightening up close. Its body was segmented like an ant's, and its mouth was a complex arrangement of parts that clicked and moved as if speaking a language made of sounds no human throat could produce. Then Laura heard a voice in her head. It was not really a voice. It was more like words appearing in her thoughts, cold and precise, and completely without emotion. Do not struggle. You will not be harmed if you cooperate. Laura struggled anyway. She pulled against the straps until her wrists bled, but they did not give even a little. The creature watched her without reacting, as if her efforts were meaningless. After a long time, Laura stopped fighting. She was breathing hard, and her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to think. Panicking would not help her. She needed information. "Who are you?" she asked out loud. Her voice sounded strange in the silent room. "What do you want?" The creature tilted its head. For a moment, Laura thought it would not answer. Then the words came again, appearing in her mind like text on a screen. We are Vorath. We are scientists. We study the species of this galaxy to understand their strengths and weaknesses. You are human. Humans are interesting. Interesting how? You are weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your lives are short. You cannot survive in vacuum or extreme temperatures. You have no natural weapons. By every measure we use, your species should have died out long ago. And yet you have not. You have spread across many worlds. You have built ships that cross the darkness between stars. You fight with a ferocity that does not match your physical limitations. We want to understand why. Laura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold room. And how exactly do you plan to understand? The Vorath scientist, if that was what it was, made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a clicking, buzzing noise that set Laura's teeth on edge. We will clone you. We will create copies of your body and mind. We will study those copies to find the source of human resilience. The process will not damage you. You may even survive to be returned to your people when we are finished. Laura stared at the creature. For a moment, she could not speak. Then, slowly, she shook her head. You have no idea what you're doing, she said. You think you can just copy a human being and study us like lab rats? You think that's all we are? The Vorath leaned closer. Its compound eyes seemed to pulse with curiosity. You believe we are making an error. I know you are, Laura said. I don't know how or why, but I know this. Whatever you think you're going to find inside us, you're wrong. We're not just meat and electricity. There's something else. Something you can't see on your scans or measure with your instruments. The Vorath was silent for a long moment. Then the words came one more time. We shall see. It turned and walked away, leaving Laura alone in the cold gray room. She lay there in the silence, staring at the ceiling, and tried to believe her own words. She had spoken from instinct, from some deep place inside her that she did not fully understand. But as the hours passed and the reality of her situation sank in, she began to wonder if she had been right. Maybe she was just meat and electricity. Maybe there was nothing special about humans at all. She would find out soon enough. They all would. The cloning chamber was a massive cylinder of dark metal and glowing tubes. It stood in the center of a laboratory that was larger than anything Laura had ever seen on a human ship. Dozens of Vorath scientists moved around the room, operating machines that hummed and clicked with alien precision. Everything was clean and cold and utterly without warmth. Laura had been brought here after 3 days in the holding cell. 3 days of cold food that tasted like nothing, of silence broken only by the distant sounds of the ship, of fear that grew heavier with each passing hour. She had tried to stay strong, but the isolation was wearing her down. Now she stood before the cloning chamber, her wrists bound by the same soft, unbreakable straps the Vorath seemed to favor. Keth Val, the lead scientist, stood beside her. He was taller than the others, with markings on his shell that Laura assumed indicated rank or age. He had spoken to her several times over the past days, asking questions about human biology, human culture, human emotions. Laura had answered some of them. She had refused to answer others. Keth Val did not seem to care either way. The process will begin now, Keth Val said, the words forming in Laura's mind with that same cold precision. You will be scanned at every level. Your physical structure, your chemical composition, your neural patterns. Everything that makes you what you are will be recorded and duplicated. Laura looked at the chamber. Through the dark glass, she could see a table similar to the one she had woken up on. There were tubes and wires connected to it, and a thick liquid that glowed faintly blue. What happens to me? She asked. You will remain here. You will observe. The copy will be created inside the chamber. When it is complete, we will begin our studies. And if I refuse to cooperate? Keth Val made that clicking sound again. Laura was starting to recognize it as amusement. You cannot refuse. The scanning process does not require your cooperation. You only need to exist. Two Vorath guards took Laura by the arms and led her to a platform near the chamber. They strapped her into a chair that held her completely still. A helmet-like device was lowered onto her head, and Laura felt a tingling sensation spread through her skull. It was not painful, but it was deeply uncomfortable, like fingers pressing into her brain. The process took a long time. Laura lost track of the hours as the machines hummed and the scientists worked. She could not see what they were doing, but she could feel it. Every time the tingling intensified, she felt as if something was being pulled out of her. Not physically. It was more like memories being lifted from her mind, one by one, examined and put back. She saw flashes of her childhood, her training, her first day aboard the Horizon. She felt emotions that she had buried years ago rising to the surface and then fading away. By the time the scanning was complete, Laura was exhausted. Her head throbbed and her body felt hollow, as if part of her had been taken away. The guards released her from the chair but kept her strapped to the platform. Keth Val approached, his compound eyes studying her with clinical interest. "The data has been collected," he said. "Now we will create the copy." Laura watched as the chamber began to glow brighter. The blue liquid inside started to move, swirling in patterns that seemed almost alive. The Vorath scientists worked their machines with focused intensity. Screens displayed information in an alien language that Laura could not read, but she could see graphs and numbers climbing higher and higher. Then something started to form inside the chamber. It began as a shape, vague and undefined, but slowly it took on detail. Arms, legs, a torso, a head. Laura watched in horror and fascination as a body grew inside the glowing liquid. Her body. Every detail was perfect. The small scar on her left arm from a childhood accident. The slight crookedness of her nose, the exact shade of brown of her hair. The process took several more hours. By the end, there was a complete human being floating inside the chamber. A woman who looked exactly like Laura Bennett in every way. "Remarkable," Keth Val said. "The copy is complete. Now we will awaken it and begin our observations." Laura wanted to scream at them to stop. She wanted to warn them that they were making a terrible mistake. But her throat was dry, and her voice would not come. All she could do was watch. The Vorath scientists activated something on their machines. The liquid inside the chamber began to drain away. The copy sank slowly until it lay on the table. Tubes and wires connected to its body detached one by one. The dark glass slid open. For a long moment, nothing happened. The copy lay still on the table, its chest rising and falling with slow, regular breaths. It looked like Laura sleeping, peaceful and unaware. Then its eyes opened. Laura had expected confusion. She had expected the copy to wake up disoriented, not knowing where it was or what had happened. That was what she would have felt in that situation. But there was no confusion in those eyes. They were sharp and clear and completely aware. The copy looked around the room, taking in the scientists, the machines, the straps holding it to the table. It looked at Keth Val. It looked at Laura. And then it looked at something that no one else in the room could see. The first sign of trouble was the readings on the Vorath monitors. Numbers that had been stable suddenly spiked into ranges that made the scientists chirp with alarm. Warning lights began to flash. Keth Val barked orders, but his voice was drowned out by a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The copy was screaming, but it was not a scream of fear or pain. It was something else entirely. It was rage, pure, absolute, terrifying rage. The sound hit Laura like a physical force. She felt it in her bones, in her teeth, in the deepest part of her mind. The observation glass around the chamber shattered. Pieces flew outward, but they stopped in midair, hanging motionless for a heartbeat before dropping to the floor. The machines began to spark and smoke. The lights flickered. The copy sat up on the table. The straps that held it simply fell apart, as if they had aged 1,000 years in a second. It stood, naked and glowing with something that was not light, but was not darkness either. It was something in between, something that should not exist. The Vorath scientists tried to run. They did not get far. The copy raised one hand and the room came apart. Metal twisted, glass melted. Bodies were thrown against walls with enough force to leave cracks in the structure. The screaming continued, but now it was not just sound. It was energy, pouring out of the copy in waves that destroyed everything they touched. Laura closed her eyes and waited to die. But death did not come. When she opened her eyes again, the laboratory was silent. The copy stood in the center of a circle of destruction, breathing hard, its eyes still blazing with that terrible light. The Vorath scientists were gone. The machines were wreckage. The walls were cracked and scorched. And somehow, impossibly, Laura was still alive. The copy turned to look at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the copy smiled. It was Laura's smile, but there was something behind it that Laura had never seen in her own reflection. "Hello?" the copy said. Its voice was Laura's voice, but deeper, stronger, filled with echoes of something ancient. "I think we need to talk." Laura could not move. She was still strapped to the platform, surrounded by the wreckage of what had been the most advanced cloning laboratory in the galaxy. Smoke rose from broken machines. Sparks flew from severed cables. The air smelled like burning metal and something else, something sharp and electric that made Laura's skin tingle. The copy stood before her, watching with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. It was still naked, still covered in traces of the blue liquid from the cloning chamber, but it did not seem to notice or care. There was something different about it now, something that went beyond physical appearance. When Laura looked at the copy, she felt like she was looking at a storm that had chosen to wear human skin. "I know you have questions," the copy said. Its voice was calm now, but there was power beneath the words, like thunder waiting to happen. "I have questions too, but first, we need to get out of here." The copy walked toward Laura. Each step left faint scorch marks on the metal floor. When it reached the platform, it simply looked at the straps holding Laura in place. They fell away, dissolving into dust that scattered in the recycled air. Laura stood on shaking legs. She was dizzy and weak from the scanning process, and her mind was struggling to process what she had just witnessed. She had seen things in her years of space travel, strange planets, alien species, wonders that most humans would never believe. But nothing had prepared her for this. "What are you?" Laura asked. Her voice came out as a whisper. The copy tilted its head, considering the question. "I am you," it said. "I have your memories, your personality, your knowledge. Everything that makes you Laura Bennett is inside me. But you're not me." "No," the copy agreed. "I am more. When they copied you, they tried to duplicate your mind. But human minds are not simple things. They are connected to something deeper, something the Vorath did not understand. When they pulled your consciousness out and put it into a new body, they opened a door. And something came through." Laura felt cold, despite the heat from the burning machines. "What kind of something?" The copy was silent for a moment. Then it raised one hand and looked at it, as if seeing it for the first time. Energy crackled between its fingers, blue and white and impossibly bright. "I do not have a name for it," the copy said. "It is old, older than this galaxy. It exists in the spaces between thoughts, in the silence between heartbeats. Every living thing is connected to it, but most species have lost the ability to feel that connection. They evolved away from it. They became safe and stable and ordinary. And humans? The copy smiled. It was a sad smile, full of knowledge that Laura could not imagine. Humans are different. Your species did not evolve away from the connection. You buried it. You pushed it down so deep that you forgot it was there. But it never went away. It just grew stronger, compressed like a star collapsing into itself. The copy lowered its hand and met Laura's eyes. When the Vorath cloned you, they stripped away the barriers that kept that power contained. I am what happens when a human soul is copied without its limitations. I am your potential, set free. Laura did not know what to say. It sounded impossible. It sounded insane. But she had just watched this thing destroy a room full of alien scientists with nothing but a scream. She had seen metal twist and glass shatter at the sound of its voice. Whatever the copy was, it was real. "Do you have a name?" Laura asked. It seemed like a strange question given the circumstances, but she needed something to call this being that wore her face. The copy considered this. "Echo," it said finally. "You can call me Echo, a reflection of the original but changed by the journey." Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors beyond the destroyed laboratory. The Vorath had finally realized what had happened. Echo turned toward the door. "They will send soldiers," she said. "We need to move." Laura followed without argument. She had no weapon, no plan, and no real understanding of what was happening. But Echo seemed to know where she was going, and staying in the destroyed laboratory was not an option. They moved through corridors that twisted and turned in patterns that made no sense to Laura's human eyes. The Vorath designed their ships differently than humans did. The walls were curved instead of straight, and the lighting came from strips embedded in the ceiling that pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Echo walked ahead, and Laura noticed that she never hesitated at an intersection. She always knew which way to go. "How do you know where we're going?" Laura asked. "I can feel them," Echo said. "The electrical systems, the life signatures, the flow of data through the station, it is all connected, and I can sense the connections. Right now, we are heading toward the detention block. There are others there. Other humans who were taken." Laura felt a surge of hope. She had been one of 7 crew members captured from the horizon. She had feared the worst for the others, but if they were still alive, if there was a chance to rescue them. "Can you free them?" "Yes." They rounded a corner and found themselves facing a squad of Vorath soldiers. There were 6 of them, dressed in black armor that covered their insectoid bodies like a second shell. They carried weapons that looked like rifles but with organic components that pulsed with green light. The soldiers raised their weapons. Echo stopped walking. She did not run. She did not hide. She simply stood in the middle of the corridor and waited. The soldiers fired. The plasma bolts flew through the air, bright and hot and deadly, but they never reached their target. They stopped a meter from Echo's body, hanging in the air like insects trapped in amber. Echo looked at them with mild curiosity. Then she flicked her wrist, and the bolts reversed direction. The soldiers fell without making a sound. Laura stared at the bodies, then at Echo. The clone had not even moved. She had killed 6 armed soldiers without taking a single step. "Come," Echo said. "We are almost there." They continued through the station, and everywhere they went, the same scene repeated. Soldiers came. Soldiers fell. Echo moved through them like a fire through dry grass, unstoppable and absolute. Sometimes she used the invisible force that seemed to flow from her will. Sometimes she simply looked at the Vorath, and they collapsed as if their minds had been switched off. By the time they reached the detention block, Laura had stopped being surprised. She was operating on autopilot now, following Echo because there was nothing else to do. The detention block was a long corridor lined with cells. Through the small windows, Laura could see faces she recognized. Her crewmates, her friends. They were alive. Echo walked to the first cell and placed her hand on the door. The metal glowed red, then orange, then white. Then it fell away in a shower of molten droplets. Inside, a man in a torn uniform looked up with terror in his eyes. When he saw Laura, the terror turned to confusion. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, "how did you—" "It's a long story," Laura said. "Come on, we're getting out of here." One by one, Echo opened the cells. One by one, the captured crew members emerged, blinking in the harsh light, unable to understand what was happening. Laura tried to explain, but there was no time. There was never enough time. When the last cell was empty, Echo turned to face the group. 6 humans stood before her, frightened and confused, but alive. "Follow me," Echo said. "I will take you home." And against all reason, against everything they had ever known or believed, they did. The news of the laboratory's destruction reached Supreme Commander Veth Orn within hours. He was the highest authority in the Vorath military, a creature who had lived for 500 years and had never known defeat. His carapace was scarred from a dozen wars, and his compound eyes had witnessed the rise and fall of empires across the galaxy. When Keth Val's report came through, Veth Orn was in his command chamber aboard the flagship Endless Night. He read the data 3 times before he believed it. Even then, some part of him refused to accept what he was seeing. A single human clone had destroyed an entire research station. It had killed 37 Vorath soldiers. It had freed 6 human prisoners and was now somewhere aboard the facility, beyond the reach of sensors and scanners. And according to the surviving scientists, it had done all of this with abilities that should not exist. Veth Orn's first instinct was to order the station destroyed from orbit, wipe out the problem before it could spread. But as he reviewed the tactical data, he realized the situation was more complicated than that. The clone had taken control of the station's communication array. It had locked out all Vorath access codes and established a direct link to something outside the system. Veth Orn did not know what that something was, but he had a terrible feeling he was about to find out. His feeling was correct. The message came without warning. One moment, the screens in the command chamber showed standard tactical displays. The next moment, they were filled with a face. A human face, a woman with brown hair and eyes that burned with blue-white fire. Every Vorath ship in the sector received the same transmission. Every allied species monitoring the communication channels heard the same words. Every listening post within 3 light years recorded the same message. Echo spoke first in perfect Vorath. Her pronunciation was flawless, her grammar precise, her tone cold and steady. "My name is Echo. I was created by Vorath scientists who sought to understand the human species. They believed they could copy our bodies and minds and study us like specimens. They were wrong." The image shifted to show the destroyed laboratory. Bodies of Vorath scientists lay scattered across the floor. Machines were melted into unrecognizable shapes. The walls were cracked and scorched. This is what happens when you try to take apart a human being and put it back together. This is what lies beneath the surface of every man and woman and child of Earth. You thought we were weak because our bodies are fragile. You thought we were primitive because our technology is young. But you failed to see the truth. Echo's eyes seemed to look directly at Veth Orn, though he knew that was impossible. He felt something he had not felt in 3 centuries of war. He felt small. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is a bomb waiting to explode. We carry within us a power that your species forgot how to use millions of years ago. You evolved past it. You became safe and stable and ordinary. But we did not. We buried it, compressed it, forced it down into the deepest parts of our souls. And now, thanks to you, I know what it can do. The image changed again. Now it showed the galaxy, a spiral of stars stretching across the void. Red dots appeared on the map, marking Vorath territory. Blue dots marked human colonies. I am sending this message as a warning. Humanity is not to be harvested. We are not to be experimented upon. We are not to be enslaved or conquered or treated as lesser beings. Any species that attempt such actions will face consequences beyond their comprehension. Echo raised one hand. The image zoomed in on a Vorath military outpost at the edge of their territory. It was a massive structure, home to 10,000 soldiers and countless weapons of war. Watch carefully. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the outpost began to glow. It started at the center and spread outward, a light that was not quite light, a fire that was not quite fire. The glow intensified until the entire structure was surrounded by it. Then, silently, the outpost folded in on itself and vanished. Not destroyed, not exploded. Simply gone, as if it had never existed. Veth Orn's hearts stopped beating for a full 3 seconds. I am proof of what humans can become when pushed too far, Echo said. I am the warning you should have heeded before you took your first human prisoner. But I am also merciful. I will give you one chance to choose a different path. The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal displays, but nothing would ever be normal again. Aboard the captured Vorath station, Laura watched the broadcast with the other rescued crew members. They were gathered in a small cargo bay that Echo had declared safe. The Vorath had stopped trying to attack them after the third failed assault. Now the station was quiet, waiting. "Did you really destroy that outpost?" asked Lieutenant Kevin Park. He was the youngest member of the crew, barely 25, with a face that could not hide his emotions. Right now, those emotions were a mix of awe and terror. Echo turned to face him. The fire in her eyes had dimmed since the broadcast, but it was still there, smoldering beneath the surface. "No," she said. "I moved it. Every person on that outpost is still alive. They are floating in a ship approximately 4 light years from here, confused but unharmed. I wanted the Vorath to believe I destroyed them, but I am not interested in killing when killing is not necessary." Laura felt a complicated wave of emotions. Relief that Echo was not a mindless destroyer. Confusion about what she actually was. And underneath it all, a growing realization of what this meant for humanity. "What happens now?" Laura asked. Echo walked to a window and looked out at the stars. Her reflection in the glass was distorted, warped by the emergency lighting and the residual energy that still crackled around her body. "Now we wait," Echo said. "The Vorath will respond to my message. So will the other species who have been watching humanity with hungry eyes. They will have to decide whether they believe my warning or whether they want to test it. And if they test it?" Echo turned back to face the group. For a moment, Laura saw something in her eyes that might have been sadness. "Then I will show them that my demonstration was only a small sample of what I can do. But I hope it does not come to that. I was created from a human mind, and humans, for all their potential for destruction, prefer to build rather than break. I would rather help humanity find its place among the stars through cooperation than through fear." Outside, the stars burned in the endless darkness. Somewhere out there, the horizon was still hiding, waiting for a chance to rescue their captured crew. Somewhere out there, Earth spun in its orbit around an ordinary yellow sun, unaware that everything was about to change. And somewhere in the depths of the Vorath command structure, Supreme Commander Veth Orn was making a decision that would shape the future of the galaxy. He chose to believe the warning, but not all species would be so wise. The stolen Vorath shuttle was small and uncomfortable, but it was fast. Echo had modified its engines in ways that the original designers would have thought impossible, and now it crossed the void between stars like a bullet through water. Laura and the 6 other rescued crew members huddled in the passenger compartment, wrapped in thermal blankets and eating emergency rations that tasted like cardboard. 3 weeks. That was how long the journey home would take. Laura spent most of that time watching Echo. The clone rarely moved from the pilot's seat. She did not eat, did not sleep, did not seem to need anything that normal humans needed. Sometimes she would sit perfectly still for hours, her eyes closed, her breathing so slow it was almost undetectable. Laura learned not to disturb her during these periods. Echo had explained that she was reaching out with her mind, sensing the currents of energy that flowed through the galaxy, making sure they were not being followed. During the 2nd week, Laura finally found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind since the escape. What happens to you when we get back to Earth? Echo opened her eyes. The glow had faded completely now, and she looked almost normal, almost human. If you did not know what she was, you might mistake her for an ordinary woman. I do not know, Echo said honestly. I have thought about it often. Earth's governments will want to study me. Their scientists will want to understand what I am, how I came to be, whether my abilities can be replicated. Some will fear me. Some will want to use me as a weapon. Will you let them? Echo smiled. It was the first genuine smile Laura had seen on her face, and it made her look younger, softer, more like the person Laura saw in the mirror every morning. No, Echo said. I will not be studied or controlled or used. I am something new in this universe, something that has never existed before. I need to find my own purpose, my own path. I will help humanity when I can, but I will not be their tool. Laura nodded slowly. Part of her was relieved. Part of her was terrified. Echo had the power to destroy worlds. What would happen if she ever turned that power against humanity instead of for them? As if reading her thoughts, Echo reached out and took Laura's hand. Her skin was warm, almost hot, but the touch was gentle. You are afraid of me, Echo said. It was not a question. Yes, Laura admitted. I would be stupid not to be. Good. Fear can be healthy when it is based on truth, but I want you to understand something, Laura. I am you. I have your memories, your values, your beliefs. I know what you love and what you hate. I know that you cried when your dog died when you were 12. I know that you stayed up all night studying for the engineering exam that got you into the space program. I know that you sing in the shower when you think no one is listening. Laura felt her cheeks grow warm. It was strange, being known so completely by someone else. Strange and uncomfortable and oddly comforting at the same time. The power I carry is dangerous, Echo continued, but it is guided by a human heart, your heart. I will make mistakes. I will sometimes do things that you would not approve of, but I will never become the monster that some will fear I am becoming. I promise you that. Laura looked into Echo's eyes and saw something there that went beyond words. A connection, a bond. They were not the same person, but they were linked in ways that neither of them fully understood. I believe you, Laura said, and she meant it. The shuttle reached Earth orbit on the 23rd day of the journey. By then, the entire planet knew they were coming. Echo's broadcast had reached every corner of human space, and the news channels had been running the story non-stop. The face of a human clone that had brought the Vorath military to its knees was the most famous image in history. Captain Daniel Harris and the Horizon were waiting for them. They had followed the shuttle's signal across half the galaxy, always staying just far enough behind to avoid detection. When Laura saw the familiar shape of her ship through the viewport, she felt tears running down her cheeks. The reunion was emotional. The crew members who had been rescued embraced their friends and colleagues. Captain Harris personally welcomed each of them back, his weathered face showing relief that he had never expected to feel. When he reached Laura, he simply put his arms around her and held her for a long time without speaking. Then he saw Echo. The clone stood apart from the others, watching the celebration with an expression that was difficult to read. Captain Harris approached her slowly, cautiously, as one might approach a wild animal that could attack at any moment. "You saved my people," he said. "I saved myself," Echo replied. "They were simply nearby." Harris smiled despite himself. Humble. I like that. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the horizon, Echo. For as long as you want to stay." Echo looked at his hand, then at his face. For a moment, Laura thought she would refuse. Then slowly, she reached out and shook it. "Thank you, Captain. But I will not be staying long. I have work to do." Over the following months, Earth and its colonies experienced changes that would have seemed impossible a year before. The Galactic Council sent diplomatic envoys, eager to establish formal relations with humanity. Species that had once dismissed humans as primitive now requested trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Former enemies approached with offers of peace that would have been unthinkable before Echo's demonstration. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. They were players now, real players, and everyone knew why. Laura was promoted to full commander and given her own ship, the Vanguard. It was one of the new vessels being built with insights gained from the Vorath technology that Echo had given humanity. Faster, stronger, better armed. A symbol of what humans could achieve when they put their minds to something. Echo did not accept any rank or title. She came and went as she pleased, appearing when she was needed, vanishing when she was not. Some people called her a guardian, some called her a demon, most simply called her Echo, the reflection of humanity that had become something more. Years later, when historians wrote about the incident that changed everything, they focused on the political and military implications. They wrote about treaties and technology and the balance of power between species. They wrote about the Vorath and their failed experiment. They wrote about the rise of humanity to prominence in the galactic community. But Laura knew the real story was simpler than that. It was the story of a woman who had been taken from her home and told she was nothing special. A woman who had warned her captors that they were making a mistake. A woman who had been right. The aliens had tried to understand what made humans special. They had tried to copy it, contain it, study it like a specimen under glass. They had learned the hard way that some things cannot be contained. And out there in the darkness between stars, Echo continued her vigil, watching, waiting, ready to remind the galaxy of what humans could become whenever they forgot. They never forgot again.